Okay, so I spent 100 hours in Dune Awakening where I experienced most of what the game has to offer, encountered some fun bugs, some really frustrating ones, and got through some really intense moments. Were the 100 hours in it worth it? Let's see. To be fair, it wasn't exactly 100 hours because this game has a character creation section, so I spent an hour just fooling around there and came up with a plan which failed straight away. Let me explain. I finished creating the character, named it Ringo Road again, I refused to elaborate on this, and decided that I wanted to become a Fremen so I can ride the worms. Then the reality hits that I will not be able to become a Fremen because that's the whole point of the game, that the Fremen either disappeared or got exterminated. Also, don't worry about any potential spoilers for the story. I will go into it later in the video, but I'll give you guys a warning before. So I choose to become a trooper as they have a grappling hook and start the game by crash landing in the middle of the desert but survive. Oh my god, the worm is massive. But it's okay though, I was safe because this was just to show me the scale of the worm. It wasn't there to eat me. Yet. Still, the game is a survival base builder, so I decided to gather some resources. Most important one being the water. As the game happens on Arrakis where the sun is scorching hot during the day, I had to find shadowy spots to hide under during the day, avoid the sun at all costs and go out only at night. What I'm trying to say here is that this is a vampire simulator game. You kill enemies, you suck their blood and you hide from the sun. And no, I'm not joking about sucking their blood. It's one of the main aspects of the game that you have blood purifiers that can transform blood into water. Now, if trying to hide from the sun and avoid dehydration wasn't hard enough, the whole game is basically a the floor is lava game, as the moment you step out in the open desert where the ground underneath you is not solid, the worm acts like a dog hearing the door being open and goes, wait, I'm coming, wait for me. The coolest thing about the worm just burrowing underground is that you can actually see the landscape changing, but temporarily, from the scale of the worm. Yeah, so this game felt massive in scale for me. I don't know if I necessarily mean that the map is huge, which, don't get me wrong, it is, but having such a huge threat looming over at all times definitely made the world feel massive. For now though, I was safe to explore the map, take down a few scavenger camps and reach a trial. What trial? Well, the main story has you going through some trials to uncover a bit more about what is happening in this world. However, for now, the only thing you have to know is that I cleared the trial and leveled up enough to learn a new skill, which was the anti-gravity grenade. You know what I did with it? I did some mentat computations. So I have this grenade that when thrown it pushes enemies on the outside of its range. But it's not just the enemy that it affects, it also affects me. So how did I decide to use this? Look at this, I can jump from a high place on the ground just like the bucket strat in Minecraft, and I failed. So this is a case of how it ended up being when I first tried it versus how I imagined it would look like. Now with all the looting around I have been doing, I managed to create my very own stillsuit, which I found really cool. To those of you that never watched Dune, stillsuits are basically a very tight suit that you'd put on that connects to every orifice in your body, captures anything that comes out of it and recycles it into water. Yes, you heard that right. Every orifice. Moving on, after having to quickly relog into the game, I jump back in without any issues and continue the story. I'm joking, of course, I get bugged the hell out in the middle of a sandstorm, and I'm thinking to myself, is this game also going to be buggy? I mean, I was only 3 hours into the game at this point, and coming from Conan Exiles, you know what? You have no idea how long I've been waiting to use this clip. Having played Conan, I knew that I should expect some really buggy moments. For now though, this was just a visual bug, so I was able to advance to the first trade post, a place where you can find quests, shops, and even Keanu Reeves? What are you doing here? And from these trade posts, you can go to the two main faction cities in this game, the Trades City, Akin, and the Harkonnen City, Harko Village. So I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting, let me spend half of the money I have to fly all the way there for a quest. You will not believe who I found in this city. Out of all the characters from the Dune universe I could have found, I encountered Master Chief from Halo. There wasn't too much of value that I did in the city for now, just spent 30 minutes roaming around, so I'll skip that because the next part is important. After using the grappling hook and grenade combo a few times, I finally started to gain an understanding of how it works, so I need to show you how I mastered it. Nailed it. Thankfully, you can get revived in this game. So I get revived and spend the next couple of hours with my friends just taking down enemy camps, completing some dungeons until we moved to a different base which was better placed strategically. We then created our first sandbikes which helped traversing the sand gaps so much. No longer did I feel the threat of Shai-Hulud. That's how the Fremen call the sandworms for those of you that may have not watched or read Dune. Now, did I get a bit too confident with this? Maybe. But for now, we thought that was some good progress for the day, so we called it a night. The next day I jumped back into the game and... Hold on. Where is the server? The server is offline? Why is the server offline? Okay, so I need to explain this part a bit. Whilst I love this type of games, I avoid playing them on public servers as I know that it comes with a lot of issues. The Conan servers were, and probably to this day are, still filled with hackers. Even if there are no hackers, I do not like the idea of spending hours and hours looting and crafting only to wake up the next morning with the base destroyed. As such, with Conan, I created a dedicated server where me and my friends could just jump on whenever we wanted. And I was hoping that would be what I would have to do for Dune 2. However, as the time got closer and closer to when the game was going to be released, I could see no news about how to build a dedicated server for it. That was until roughly 1 week before the early access was going live. Now, whilst I did not get the early access, I was still interested in learning how to create the server and, to my surprise, I couldn't. So I learned that the developers wanted to make players feel like they are playing an MMO. This meant they needed a lot of players together. However, they also needed to keep the maps not too chaotic, so they came up with a plan. They would have a main server with each having multiple clusters of worlds where a bunch of people would play. So say for example you have the main server, I don't know, Brutus. On this Brutus server you'd have 100 players max. This server would have main hubs like Arrakis or Kharkov village where everyone would go. However, your cluster would only contain, let's say, 25 people maybe. And these 25 people would be visible on the main map, Haga Basin. You could also see the other players on the other clusters if you were to go on the deep desert, which was beyond the main map. Right, so why did I go into so much detail about this? Well, due to this decision, the developers could not allow dedicated servers, and as such, you'd have to either play on the public servers or rent a server from one of their 3, I think, main trusted sources. And so I did, but an update basically brought the server down for 24 hours. And I want to make things very clear here. I do not say this to blame the service I bought. Things happen, things break. The game literally just came out, so obviously there might be things like these happening. But yeah, so I was like, okay, the server is off. I have 2 options. Either touch grass now or go play on a public server. Easy choice. Arrakis is a desert, so it doesn't really have grass to touch. So I created a new character and jumped on the public server and started my journey without any issues whatsoever. Besides the fact that it was completely unplayable, as the place you crash into at the start of your journey became your purgatory, as you cannot leave it. Fine, the game doesn't want me to play it. I guess it's time to go back to playing Knights of the Old Republic 2 in the meantime. And after the server was back up, I jumped back in and started enjoying a peaceful stroll through the dunes of Arrakis, but I couldn't help but get this eerie feeling that something was wrong. Something wasn't right. It was too peaceful. So I'm like, hold up a minute. I take me and my friend on a sand bike and start going around the open desert aimlessly, trying to summon Shai-Hulud, but there's nothing. When you stare too much into the emptiness of the emptiness stares back into you. Shai-Hulud disappeared? It felt so empty. I tried to keep going for a bit without it, but it wasn't the same. So I restarted the server and Shai-Hulud is back. Yay! And boy did I regret that decision. I should have honestly waited a bit longer to restart if I knew what was about to happen. Actually, you know what, scratch that. It wouldn't have been so fun without him. So our little team got to the point where you have to get to the next area of the map. However, to do that you need to cross a very large open desert area. We were ready though. We had a plan. Go in a line as straight as possible to reach the other side. However, as soon as it started, disaster hit. Shai-Hulud was on to us. Split up! Split up! And one of us jumped off the bike. May Shai-Hulud show you mercy. Okay, I made it to the safety zone. What is happening there? Oh, he survived. I'm coming to the rescue. Jump, 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 jump. Let's go, let's go. He's coming. He's right behind us. Oh dear lord, look at him. He's coming. We are so done. And we escaped somehow. But lost one of the bikes in the middle of the desert. We couldn't leave it there. At this point in the game, the amount you had to farm for such a bike was too much. The resources were too important. We had to get the bike back. So we go back in the open desert. Okay, I see it. But Shai-Hulud is already out. Get on, jump on the bike, jump on the bike. Low fuel, what do you mean low fuel? Oh god, he's right behind, he's right behind. Oh, we made it. Mission successful. And as scary as that was, that intense moment was amazing. But it was done. Time to set up a new base in this region and progress. And when I say set up a new base, I don't mean me. I'm so bad at making a base look good. Luckily, not everyone in the party had the same issue, so a new base was built, resources were farmed, and a bike MK2 was created. Also, I met with this very scary Harkonnen guard. Look at how menacing he is. And so with this mighty powerful bike, I decide to explore the map further and... Oh there, quicksand, what is happening? Luckily, you have a tool that allows you to store the bike away, so I managed to save it. Quicksand, something to keep in mind for the future. Oh god, I did it again 5 minutes later. I cannot jump out of it. And this right here is probably the one and only time I actually played it smart. All the computations and probabilities flowed into my brain and I found a way out. While I could not jump out of the sand, I was able to jump on the bike to be able to use a skill. I used the grappling hook out of the quicksand and quickly stored the bike away before it gets devoured by the sand. Nailed it. And from this point, I actually paid attention to the quicksand. There was another force of nature though that I would have some issues with. I briefly mentioned it earlier, but this game has sandstorms. Conan Exiles also had sandstorms actually. It kind of made me think that's the reason the company were able to acquire the rights to a Dune game. When they pitched in the idea, the board was like, but how do we know you'll be able to make a Dune game? They went, we have sandstorms, look! You crazy sons of bitches, you got it. Regardless, I was raiding a base that was probably way out of my level and was constantly on the brink of death. I was also dying of dehydration, and to top that up, I opened the map and see a massive sandstorm coming whilst I was out in the open. If such a sandstorm catches you out in the open, you are dead. And so the only possible option for me was to hide in a corner with a wall against where the sandstorm was coming from and pray for the best. And as the sandstorm was passing, I was just hearing things explode around me and look at this, screen is even shaking. But the sandstorm was gone and I was able to return back to base. And when I got there, I discovered my calling. This game has different weapons you could use. Some melee, some ranged. For ranged you'd have shotguns, flamethrowers, miniguns, rifles and my favorite, snipers. So I crafted a sniper and took it for a test. And I loved it. So I decided I would go for the full headshot build. Right, so let me explain this too. At the beginning of the game you do choose your class, but that is just your starting one. As you progress through the map, you find different trainers for other classes, each having unique skills or unique passives. One of the classes you can become is a Mentat. Mentats in Dune are basically known as human computers, and because of that they are quite skilled at assassinating. Earlier on I completed the basic training for Mentat and I noticed a skill that sounded really fun. Hunter-Seeker. Hunter-Seekers are basically small controllable deadly darts you can use to assassinate your enemies. Now tell me that doesn't sound like a fun concept. Speaking about concepts though, I think this is a good place to talk about it. So I noticed something about the game. When creating a game in a known universe, you technically have two main approaches on the mechanics of the game. One of the approaches is that you have certain mechanics you'd like your game to have and try to integrate them into the game with established factors in the universe so it won't feel forced. For example, you know your game is an open world and you want to have enemies appear randomly on the map so you can fight them. That's good, but you kind of have to think of reasons why they are there. So maybe you integrate them in the story. The enemies are trying to capture this place in order to make it their base of operations. Or maybe you want to have healing for your character. Well, now you have to find ways for your character to heal. Will you have them use bandages, healing sprays, nanotech mumbo jumbo? You need to integrate them somehow. Now the other approach of this would be completely the opposite. You have ideas or features from the universe that you want to introduce to the game and have to think how they would make sense in the game. I'll take this game for example for this because I feel like that was the approach of the developers for this one. Clearly they were big fans of the concepts in the books or movies and they just wanted to make them work in the game. So you have this Hunter-Seeker Assassin tool. Okay, well let's put it as a skill for the Mentat, that should work. In the Dune universe only the Mentats are capable of controlling them? Yeah, but in the universe the person who controls it also becomes unable to move. Okay, well let's make it high reward as it deals a lot of damage but also high risk as the moment you use it you are unable to use your character. And whilst we're talking about this Hunter-Seeker thing, I have some issues with it. Why is it so loud? I cannot assassinate anyone with it because they can hear it coming from miles away. Why would you not make it more silent so I can actually get behind the enemies to target their back? I don't think I was ever able to assassinate someone from the back in this playthrough because they'd always turn around. Anyway, let me give you a few more examples. You also have the Holzman shield. And they could have easily just left it as a basic shield, but they went out of their way to make it feel like a Holzman shield. So in the Dune universe you have this shield that can basically protect you from all the projectiles besides very few exceptions. But it's not just used to protect you from ranged attacks, it can also protect you from melee attacks. It does however have a weakness which they also integrated: slow attacks. If you slowly make your way through the shield rather than quick attacks, you can break through it. You also have features like the Lanstrad, which is basically a gathering of all the major houses from the Dune universe, and they found a way to integrate that too. To not make this too long, there's so many examples like this in the game where it made me feel that first they had an idea from the Dune universe they wanted to introduce and they had to find ways to introduce it, and I think that's really fun and it worked well for the most part. Moving on though, after the server stopped working again for a bit, jumped back into the game and realized the worm was gone. Again. This time I took advantage of it though. There's these parts on the map that hold flower sand, which you need a lot for crafting. The issue is that it attracts the worm much faster than the normal sand. And as such, with the worm gone, I took the opportunity to farm a lot of it in peace. And this peace was broken a bit by a huge spaceship that scouts the desert in the night looking for you. If they manage to find you, they freeze you into place and send some heavy troops. Well, we managed to escape them and moved on to target a base that was completely out of our level. The fun part is, the reason why we were able to do this was because we jumped on a rock at a high place and then started sniping them from a distance. It's a really fun feeling. Now, one quest had me climbing one of the tallest mountains in the game, which was made a bit easier by another one of the gadgets from the Dune universe, the suspensor belts. There are multiple suspensor belts you can use. Just like in the movies, they stop you from taking falling damage. And one of the beauties of it is that if you hold space as you are climbing it a bit faster as it propulses you a bit higher. And there's a reason why I'm telling you this in such a small detail. Because after jumping down that mountain and having to climb another one, I used my hook claw by accident while I was in that state and basically fly up, at which point I stop for a second and go, wait, what just happened? How did I do that? So I recreate it and find well, I can't call it speedrun strategy because there's no speedruns of this game, but I discovered the most optimal way of climbing in this game. From this point onwards, I will use it constantly, and you will notice that even though there are other suspensor belts available as the game progresses, I will use the passive one for 80% of the game as that is the only one that I got this trick to work with. As I continued through the game, I changed my build to a complete headshot build and had a lot of fun assassinating enemy bases. I even got to create a buggy, which was becoming quite necessary as the next ore that was needed was the carbon ore. And unlike the previous ones, this one was quite heavy, so it was filling my backpack way too fast. As such, I created the buggy with a storage and went for some mining rounds. On a side note, I can't remember where I've seen this, but there was a post on the Reddit community where a guy was saying how one of the quality of life improvements this game could have was to be able to name your vehicle. To which another guy replies something like, yeah, I would like to name mine on Nissan Al-Gaib. I don't remember who that was, but that was funny. After finishing with the mining, we were ready to tackle a new region of the map and find a suitable spot for a new base. Which we did next to another trade post. This mission was only a scouting mission though, as we didn't have any resources to actually build a base there yet. At this point it was more like an outpost where we can replenish our water and leave the extra things we cannot carry. And right here I can show you a good example of how much faster it is to climb using the suspensor belt. This is the difference in speed. I managed to climb this mountain so much faster, but you know what the issue was? Well, the gadget used for that is constantly being used, and the more it's used, the closer it gets to breaking. For now though, I got to the top of the mountain and enjoyed the beautiful sunrise. Meanwhile, my friend found out that his quest did not complete as he did not start from the checkpoint he was supposed to at the bottom of the mountain, so he had to do it all over again. And his suspensor belt broke. And he was out of water and dying of dehydration. As he was stuck in the middle of the mountain, I took it upon myself to get another suspensor belt and water and deliver it to them. Now, unluckily, I didn't check my own suspensor belt and it broke while I was climbing, which was not ideal. The rescue mission was a success though as I delivered the water, but now I had to find a way to get down. So I just jumped and hoped for the best. It worked out somehow. Back to farming resources it was. Some of you may ask now, what exactly was I farming for? Well, I was farming the resources to create the next vehicle of the game, the Ornithopter. That was a big goal of the game for me. And as I was farming I noticed something is different. The whole area started becoming more sandy. At first I thought it was just an effect of the area I was farming the resources in, but then I got back to the base and the sand gust persisted. So I found out that every week there's this Coriolis storm, which is a storm that is more massive than the normal sandstorm that encompasses the whole map and destroys everything in its path. Everything but the base, which is protected. At least on the main map. In the deep desert, from what I can understand, everything gets destroyed. Now this had an unexpected effect. So at this point we didn't have a place to put the buggy in, and so we left it outside and finished for the day. And the next day I prepared myself to go for another mining run, only to find out that the already half broken buggy got fully broken. So I tried to repair it. Normally when you repair a vehicle part, as you repair it, it also increases a red bar on the opposite side. The more that bar increases, the less you can repair the item, so it can reach a point where the maximum you can repair the items is like 30% or so. For some reason though, the buggy being destroyed completely reset that red bar. So I was able to basically repair it to almost full. So anyway, after repairing the buggy and going through another trial, I got to awaken an amazing power called Prescience. This power allows all the cooldowns to be reduced, increases your damage, increases your health and so on. And throughout the game I proceeded to use it for one thing and one thing only. I kept pressing the button by accident while I was inside the base or doing absolutely nothing important. Out of all the times I used this ability, I think I used it purposely like 20% of the times. Don't ask me how that is possible, I have no idea. There is absolutely no reason for it to happen, but it constantly did. Before I continue to the next point, I want to show you the hardest mountain to climb. The hardest mountain to climb is the 1000 subscriber mountain. If you do enjoy the video, do consider helping me reach the peak, as it's almost in sight. But seriously, I wanted to show you the result of me optimizing the climbing technique, as I realized you don't even need to touch the ground. If you keep staying in that anti-gravity field, you can basically climb a whole mountain in one go. I find that quite neat. Now, you might be noticing something about the pace of me showing you things. There are a lot of hours that are being skipped, and there's a good reason for that. Because for a lot of the game, what you will be doing is farming resources and defeating camps, and the way I put it right now, I make it sound repetitive, but at the time of playing it really did not feel like that. It felt fun exploring around. I honestly think this is a great game to stream, as you can interact with your audience whilst you mine things around and do some dungeons. But for a video it doesn't really work as well, because after showing it to you once or twice it can become quite repetitive. So there will be a few gaps in which all I did was just mine around. Moving on, before completing the task of creating an Ornithopter, I go through some more dungeons, and at one point when I got out of one, I see another event the game has to offer. A thunderstorm is coming. Or so I thought, but no, it was just a visual bug. One thing that did happen was that I had to move the buggy to the new location. I had to do that because the new location had another ore that was even heavier than the previous one, and I did some math which scared me because of how many aluminum pieces we needed for 3 Ornithopters. So I moved the buggy and basically spent the next 4 hours just mining more aluminum, gathering water and doing some quests. At this point of the game though, the water stopped being necessary for survival and started being necessary for crafting too. So the whole process of turning aluminum ores into usable aluminum was bottlenecked by the large amount of water that was needed. Compared to the later stages, this is still nothing though. And as I got closer to the final rank of the tools, MK6, I started realizing that for the final ones we will need to venture out in the deep desert, and honestly, I was dreading it. I knew that's where all the players would be. And so it was while I was mining aluminum around the time when I encountered the hardest enemy in the game. And when you think about hard enemies in games, you think about stuff like mechanics being hard or them dealing too much damage, but this enemy was nothing like that. This enemy had a bug where all my attacks was going through him, so I could not hit them at all, but they could still hit me. Weirdly enough, other people from the party had no issues with it. And this happened a few times at this pace, and I have no clue what triggers it. But yeah, after some serious grinding, it was time to try out the Ornithopters, and they were as much of a game changer as the bikes were. At this point, we still did not have the whole map discovered, and they would prove very helpful with that. So when you start the game, most of the map is covered in sand. You can discover areas by launching a probe if you are at a high enough altitude in an undiscovered area. So we take the Ornithopters for a ride. The Ornithopters are quite slow to fly, but I quickly realized that it has 2 modes. The flying mode and the vulture mode. And when you are in the vulture mode, it's basically the new... okay, maybe not the new anymore, but the newer flying mechanic from World of Warcraft. Meaning you enter a gliding mode where you can gain a lot of speed. So the tactic for this is to gain altitude and use the gliding speed for movement. And with the Ornithopters finished, it was finally time to relocate the base. We avoided doing that until now because there were a lot of items that had to be carried over to the new base, which was very far away. We could have theoretically used the buggy, but that would have taken hours probably. So instead we chose to grind even more hours than it would have taken us to create 3 Ornithopters and move the items like that. But it looked cool though. Moving so many items to the new base felt like moving houses. You collect everything anywhere you can and just put the boxes in the new house and everything looks messy until you unpack. One thing I found amusing around this time was how at one point as I was using the Ornithopter I was listening to some music. And the song I was listening to at the time was one from the Fallout series, which you guys will probably be familiar with. And as I fly above the open sand listening to this, I suddenly see a massive sandstorm approaching. Well, more like I was approaching the massive sandstorm. Whilst the song was still going, I could not have listened to a better song as this was happening. Now, the reason why I was listening to this music was because after going through the menu of the game, I have discovered that this game has some radio stations. And whilst I tried listening to the stations a bit, I did not find them too entertaining as they had some generic songs only. But they did remind me of the radio in Fallout 76, so I thought that would go quite well with the atmosphere of the game. Especially as going into the late game, I realized I had to go in the radiated zone to farm uranium. However, before being able to do that, I had to get a radiation suit. And so instead of doing that, I got distracted and went to clear a few enemy bases. So let's talk about the enemies for a bit. Dungeons have unique schematic as a reward at the end, and after going through a dungeon I found the sword schematic. Up until now I've played mostly ranged, but I saw this one and it sounded amazing, so I wanted to give it a try. And I encountered some issues with it. At this point in the game, just like me, most enemies had holdsman shields. And fighting melee against an enemy does require some skill, as you have to know when to dodge, when to parry, and when to use a slow attack in order to break the holdsman shield. Fighting one enemy is hard. Fighting two, well, good luck. Due to the enemy attack pattern, it's next to impossible to fight two enemies at once, as they simply outnumber you. You try to use a slow attack on one, and the other one just interrupts you. It almost doesn't even matter what armor you have, as if there's two enemies, you will probably die. And if there's two melee enemies and a long range shooting at you, the only option you have is to run at that point. We do need a break from fighting, so let me tell you about the building in this game. It exists. That's all. To be honest, I cannot say more than that because I did not do any building in this survival builder game. However, the base is starting to look quite grand already, and it's not even in its final form. Wait until you see it later. The thing about this game is that because you are given so many tools, it almost feels like playing a sandbox game. What do I see as a sandbox game? Well, not necessarily Minecraft. I'm thinking more of the sort of game that gives you different abilities or tools that allow you to interact with its world in vastly different ways. A game such as Breath of the Wild. That's the type of feeling this game gave me at times, like being able to use the anti-gravity field grenades, hooks, and so on. I mean, look at this. Sure, my Ornithopter might not have a passenger seat, but who needs that when you can do this? These are the best moments in the game for me, when you go, what if? And it works. Well, that and when you feel overpowered. Case in point, absolutely annihilating this camp. Back to the game though, after I defeated two bosses and... Wait, I forgot to tell you this, but I also learned how to use the sprint spell, which is such a useful skill. I only wish the animation for the run would be a bit different. Like for example if your hands would just lag behind you a bit as you are leaning in front. Anyway. I went to the main city as I realized you can customize not only how your character looks but also how your vehicle looks, so I spent 40% of the money we had to make myself look like Revan. Not only that, but you can also buy things to decorate your house, so I proceeded to spend the next hour or so decorating my room and ended up with this. And some of you with keen eyes might notice that the customization includes Atreides insignias. That is because the two main factions of this game are Harkonnen and Atreides. I wanted to go for the Atreides one to find out more details about Duke Leto Atreides, which, for the 100 hours I was in, I honestly did not find out too much about him. Right, so after doing some more mining in the main map, I realized we got everything we needed from that area, meaning it was finally time to reach the deep desert, and oh boy, was the experience interesting. So we started off by exploring a bit at the entrance of the deep desert, checking some shipwrecks and collecting some loot. And then we got a bit more adventurous and we explored a bit further into the deep desert to find the metals we needed for the MK6 tools and weapons, the endgame loot. And we did find some, but we also found what I thought was gonna be a research lab, aka the dungeons of this game. So far these dungeons never possessed any threat, but for this one, well, I don't think it was a dungeon. So we go in it and start fighting some enemies that are really strong. Just one enemy took 4 times more effort than any previous enemies we fought before. And there were at least 5. But we kept running away and separating them, taking them down one by one, and we did it. But more came. Okay, we struggled with these ones too, but eventually we did take them down. And more came.
His last order was, "Come," and they came. All of them, even the dragons.
And at this point we were running quite low on healing. I already died once at this point, I believe, but we managed. And another round came and it went like this for 30 minutes until we gave up and said we'd just return later. We did not. Right, so time to go back out as this experience was really frustrating. And I had a realization. We didn't see anyone on the map. The deep desert, the desert where everyone should be, was empty. And so I thought I might have misunderstood what the deep desert was supposed to be. I was really confused. I had to go online to look up what other people's experience of the deep desert was, and it turns out I was right the first time. The deep desert seems to be populated with a lot of people, and the PvP is turned on by default in most of the areas, so since the game got released, it has seen a lot of controversy. Controversy which I completely missed, as for some reason, from now on for the whole duration of the game, I had a completely different experience than what seems to be the norm. The deep desert wasn't a relentless battlefield where I lost countless of hours farming resources only to get blasted from somewhere and lose all the progress and the Ornithopter. No, it was almost like the husk of a lost civilization. Sometimes I would pass by buildings that did not seem abandoned, but still there was no one around. However, before I became fully aware of the situation, I wanted to finish the story of the game, so let's get into the story a bit. And at this point I will spoil basically everything there is to spoil about the story of the game, and also talk about aspects that are not just from the movies but from the books too, so skip ahead if you still want to avoid this. You can use the annotations. Are you still here? Good. Now, as the introduction cinematic suggests, the story happens in an alternative universe from the books. A universe where Lady Jessica, the mother of the protagonist of the movies, decided to listen to her Bene Gesserit council and give birth to a daughter. And if you know absolutely nothing about Dune, well, this will be a bit confusing, and there is zero chance I can cram the amount of details needed in this section. Just know that not giving birth to a male, Paul Atreides, has huge implications for the story, as everything from the moment he came to Arrakis is revolving around him. And so because he was never born, Duke Leto Atreides was never assassinated, because Jessica listened to the Bene Gesserit, so she was trained to detect lies. In the books, the soon-to-be Atreides traitor, Dr. Yue, had a private conversation with Lady Jessica. I imagine that this is when he was caught in this universe. Great, but because Paul was never born, the Fremen did not have atomics and a leader to help them fight the Sardaukars, so some people say they were exterminated. I personally don't believe that. Even in the movies and books, most of the Fremen the people interacted with were not from the deepest part of the desert. They just know how to play it safe and hide as much as needed where no one can reach them. Anyway, so that's where we come in. We crash land from a prisoner ship and are tasked with two things. Find the Fremen, wake the sleeper. Who is the sleeper? Hopefully not you, because you fell asleep from listening to me talking about the story. Okay, no, but that is not something you find out for a huge portion of the game. In fact, it's not even after you finish the story of the game that you find out. However, on our journey there, we get into these visions where we learn about ways of being a Fremen and meet with different characters from the books. The moment I reached the final trial, I entered this Fremen siege, which is basically their dwelling, and found out, or at least I think I found out, that the main character has Fremen blood in them. The plot thickens. Now, a very silly part for an MMO here is that the moment you enter the story instance, no other player from the party can do it. That or the whole server cannot enter the instance, which would be even weirder. So as I was doing it, my team had to literally just wait outside. Anyway, so the moment you enter this siege, you meet with this character named Ari. And it took me a while to realize that in fact, this is Jessica's daughter, Alia. Well, in this universe, they call her Aris, or something. She's helping with our cause. Somehow. You can clearly see the creators did not make this game with the main focus being the first book, as so many concepts rely on future books. For example, you have the Ixians, a planet that is very much almost pushing the line on how much technology they can make before making all the houses angry at them. You also have Tleilaxus, which are a big part of the second book. And so the final mission as of now takes you to an underground lab where the Tleilaxus were creating Golas and meet with a face dancer who reveals something massive. And I've seen people be quite confused about the implications, so let me break it down a bit. Firstly, face dancers. What are they? Well, they are basically people who are trained to control their muscles to the point of being able to take any appearance they want, including the voice. The person who you are speaking with is just that. They are not the Reverend Mother, which is basically the boss of the witches, the Bene Gesserits. Secondly, I've seen people argue that every player in this game is just a clone, and that... well, that is not it to my understanding. This face dancer says that we have been killing our brothers and sisters, and we were just in a Tleilaxu lab where they were creating more Golas. So my belief is that every player is a Gola. Okay, cool, but then what is a Gola? A Gola is created by the Tleilaxu. Tleilaxus being a race of, I guess, weird flesh engineers. These engineers manufacture the way to reanimate a dead body and model it to their liking. They can make them be mentats, swordmasters, whatever they need. Now, for the most part, these Golas have their own personalities. However, they do sometimes have memories of their past selves. The ultimate goal for Tleilaxus is to be able to reawaken a deceased person so that the Gola can become them again. In essence, having them resurrected. They have noticed that massive emotional shocks or dramatic experiences could theoretically bring the Gola to that state. Right, so what does this all mean? I have no idea so far. I think there's going to be more stories developing as the game gets updated, as this is quite unfinished for now. There is something that I wanted to show you though, related to what I was doing during the story missions, but it has nothing to do with the story itself. Right, so as I was going through this mission on a spaceship, spending 25 minutes on it and almost getting to the end, the game just crashed. So I had to reload and do it again. Okay. Load up the game, skip the intro, get in. I had to restart from the beginning, and it disconnected me again. Skip the intro, get back in. I had no idea why this was happening, but you know what the worst part was? Having to hear that intro so many times that it's ingrained in my head now. At this point I just randomly find myself saying, I dream of it, throughout the day. On a serious note though, I don't even know if I would have mentioned this if it wasn't that it happened to me again on the next mission. So I had this mansion I had to infiltrate, and I saw an opportunity. An opportunity to use my technique again to get on top of that massive building, but not the way the game intended. And it all started well until suddenly I got disconnected again. No, surely this was a coincidence, right? Let's try again. I set myself up to the perfect angle, I used the grappling hook magnificently, skipped the first part of the stronghold and start heading to the next one. And it crashed again. Right, well, the infiltration wasn't even that good this time, I can do better. Look at this, I'm barely touching the ground, so I infiltrate the place, poison some water and watch a cutscene. Success. Is what I would have wanted to say, but it crashed again during the cutscene. I dream of it. I get back in and look how smooth this attempt is. Just look at it, I'm literally not touching the ground on this attempt, and this time I just lost patience and I did it too quick. And I think I know why this is happening. I think I figured it out. My theory is that this is happening because my party was doing the same mission as I was and they got in before me. They had no issue with this mission. And I say this because this was the same thing that happened with the previous one, and once they finished their part, it stopped disconnecting me. I'm honestly struggling to understand what part of a game coding for an MMO would even make this possible. I eventually finished it though, so with the story out of the way, the only ingredient we needed to get to the last tier after farming in the deep desert was spice. Spice. Something that is collected from craters spawning randomly on the map and that you have to farm the same way you farm flower sand. Okay, let me get to one and make some calculations. So every spice field so far gives you roughly 500 spice sand. You need to process 100 spice sand for 1 spice melange. So I'm thinking to myself, that would take so long, we should probably just make the sand crawlers used to collect more sand. So I check how much you need for a sand crawler. You need at least 50 spice melange for a vehicle piece and you need around 5 of them. Right, okay, but I cannot create them because you need an advanced vehicle creator, which is another 50 spice melange. And wait, let's not forget that sure, you might have a sandcrawler, but you need a way to carry it, so you need a carrier Ornithopter, which is another at least 5 pieces of 50 spice melange, which means at least 550 spice melange pieces times 100 equals 55,000 spice sand, which means I'd need to find at least 110 of these rare spice fields. Did I make the calculations correctly? I don't know, but even if they were wrong, that doesn't even include all the equipment and tools, cause let's not forget they also need spice melanges. So I was like, there has to be a better way. And now, up to this point, I didn't really understand how the spice fields work. I just found some randomly on the main map, so I thought there has to be more in the deep desert, right? So back to the deep desert I went. And I think on my way there I realized at this point it's been 100 hours in the game and I never actually got caught by Shai-Hulud. So if I was to go out to collect some spice with my Ornithopter, I need to understand if the worm can eat the vehicles as well. The only properly dangerous situation was at the start, where someone from my party got stuck in the open sand, but he was on the bike and the worm opened his mouth under him, but his bike didn't disappear. He didn't even die. So I had to test it for later. So I spent some time mining some more to create a test buggy, took it to the desert and well, let's see. Yep, completely obliterated the buggy. So the stakes for going to the deep desert were high. But here's the thing, up until now I only explored up to half of the deep desert, and my belief was that everyone on the server was fighting for the spice fields at the end of the deep desert. That had to be where everyone is, right? Well, I was half right. After going through to the end of the deep desert, I found some massive spice fields, which was great for the farming. However, all these massive spice fields and absolutely no one around. What was happening? I collected as much of the spice sand as I could and started looking for other players around. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. 2 hours of going around the deep desert and absolutely nothing. And as I lost all hope and fly around aimlessly, I see other players. One collecting spice and another one carrying them with the Ornithopter carrier. So I try interacting with them. Hello? Oh my god, you're the only people I've seen around here. Their response is basically, yeah, it's really dead. Indeed, stranger. Indeed it is. And I emphasize on this because I think my experience is vastly different from other players. At the time of writing this, the game seems to struggle a lot in the endgames, with hackers literally stealing your base, your vehicles and speedrunning around. At that, with very limited resources that need to be farmed, and it brings up some toxic behavior which I'm honestly glad I avoided. One last thing I wanted to show you. So after the test I've made to see if the worm can destroy vehicles, the stakes were high. As I mentioned earlier, in order to farm spice sand properly, you need to have a sandcrawler, which is absolutely massive. So you cannot go out in the open desert with it, you'd get eaten instantly. Instead, you also have to create a massive ornithopter that is carrying it. And it takes tons of resources. And it was a pain to build them. Eventually we did though, so I want to show you the result of that. We find a medium-sized spice field and I was like, alright, let's give this bad boy a test run. So I start vacuuming the spice sand. And surprisingly, it was a lot more calm than I expected, so after a few minutes we became quite relaxed about it. Why was I so relaxed? Well, the game has a way to warn you if the worm is approaching, which is a motion wave starting from flat, moving to sporadically in the red color. That is how you know you need to leave. And as I was farming the spice manually, I basically had to farm some, wait until the bar gets red, go on the Ornithopter and wait for it to pass. But as I was vacuuming this and singing, disaster struck. Shai-Hulud spawns right next to us. No warning. Panic. Oh dear, maybe we can make it. But the carrier Ornithopter is so hard to maneuver, so by the time we were able to turn it around, the worm just destroys it. This is a disaster. And to make things worse, later on I tried to disassemble the sandcrawler and put the pieces in the Ornithopter to run away, but after disassembling one piece, my wielding torch broke. So there it was. The sandcrawler lost as well. The worm came not too long after to destroy it. All that progress. Gone. And I'm showing you this not to complain about it necessarily, but because this was all whilst there were no enemies around it either. I cannot begin to imagine how frustrating it must be to have to do this resource gathering whilst you are forced into PvP. I think the game can improve in the endgame a bit, because as it stands right now, I don't think it's too fun. So did I play this game essentially just local co-op? Yeah, it looks like it. But even like this, I still enjoy the game. It has an intriguing story, not just a retelling of the first book. It has some interesting mechanics which create fun moments, and it has some very intense moments. I've been waiting for this game to come out since it got revealed, and after more than 100 hours in it, I can say, yeah, all in all, I had a very fun time in it. It was indeed quite buggy and frustrating at some points. Especially once you reach the final stage of creating items, the progress halts to a crawl. But I'm quite confident that the developers will resolve these issues down the line. It is quite clear to me that they have a passion for this project. With that being said, it is time to conclude this. If you like this video, I challenge you to place a thumbs up on the video and summon the subscribe button. Let's see if we can get to 1000. Now, back to Knights of the Old Republic 2. I'll see you there. Bye!